everybody. It is wonderful to see some familiar faces. I want to welcome you all to the 2021 Black Alumni Alliance Summit. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for this second summit since the inception of the Black Alumni Alliance in 2018. We are thrilled to be kicking things off this evening with a conversation featuring Kim R. Ford, class of 1999, CEO of Martha's Table here in Washington, D.C. For those of you who I may not have met, my name is Anna Wyeth. I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement here at Sidwell. Before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. We'll ask everybody to keep yourselves on mute during the discussion just to minimize disruptions. And we encourage you to change your Zoom name to include your full name and add your class year. You can think of it like your virtual name tag. It lets everybody else know who you are and really helps us all feel the full participation of everyone who's here tonight. And of course, if we can encourage you to keep your video on, if you feel comfortable doing so, that would be great. If you've never changed your name on Zoom, you can do it by hovering over your name in the participant list. And under that More button, you can rename yourself to add in that class year or other information. So throughout tonight, if you have questions, we're going to save asking questions to the dedicated Q&A portion later in the conversation. If you do have questions, you can feel free to send them in the chat either to me or my colleague Emma O'Leary, who's here as well, and we can ask your question for you. You can also, if you'd like to ask it yourself, just send us a note in the chat that you'd like to ask a question, and then we'll just let you know when it's your turn to ask it. And now I am really thrilled to turn it over to our Black Alumni Alliance Advisory Council co-clerks, Lory Ivey Alexander, class of 97, and Nasser Muhammad, class of 2005, who are going to be leading our conversation with Kim. Lory and Nasser, over to you.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm excited to be here. I'm really honored to sit down and talk to Kim. I consider Kim my friend, someone that I respect very deeply, and I am just really excited for tonight. I'm Lory Ivey Alexander. As Anna said, I'm one of the co-clerks here at the BAA Alumni Alliance. We are excited and ready to go. I'm going to turn it over to Nasser, who's going to kick us off tonight. But we want this to be a dialogue, a conversation, and we hope to, connect with Kim both as, in her professional role and as well as a member of our community. So go ahead, Nasser. Let's get started.
All right. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Lory. And of course, thank you, Kim, for joining us. And we're thrilled to be here. And I think one of my favorite pieces about this is that this isn't like an interview with, Oprah Winfrey. This isn't an interview with, Diane Waters. We're having a conversation with our friend. And so I feel like we're in the midst of our home and we're just hanging out and we're just kicking it, chilling. And so we want to, just have a very honest, authentic, and very transparent conversation with you, Kim. And so for those of you who are not familiar, this is Kim R. Ford, and she is native Washingtonian. And, and I appreciate that because DC is constantly changing and the area is constantly changing. And so many times or so often you hear the narrative that there isn't anyone out there who is from DC or who is from Washington, DC. But we actually do have so many Native people who are still here and thriving and doing things that are affecting the people in our city, especially what you're doing with Martha's Table, Kim. And so in the spirit of Women's History Month, I want to get right into it and just ask you straight up and straightforward. As a woman in leadership, what has it been like for you? And if you could, what are some of the barriers that you face as a woman in leadership today in 2021?
Awesome. Well, first of all, thanks so much, Sidwell, for having me. I'm very honored to be here. Thanks so much, Lory and Nasser. Just so excited about the conversation. I know we're virtual, but we really are going to try to make this a conversation as best as we can. Drop your questions in the chat. Go ahead and pepper me. Half y'all got my text I see Naya in the house, Ralph, Natalie, Shava, Jerome. All right, so we're gonna be taking stuff from all these different angles. Thanks to Brian Garman. I also just want to shout out Anna and Emma, Dr. Castle, who's been an incredible help in the Sidwell community for Martha's Table, serving as a pro bono health advisor for us. And shout out to Dr. Treva Lindsay, who kicked us off at the first Black Alumni Alliance Summit a couple of years ago. So this is meant to be a fireside chat. So go ahead, light me on fire, ask me the questions. Nasser, I think some things about like being a woman in leadership, I think there's sometimes there are things that are very clearly about being a woman, but a lot of times what I would say is it's really hard, at least for me, to dissect which pieces are being a woman, which pieces are being seen as young, which pieces are being Black, which pieces are all intertwined with one another. So I think, when we talk about being a woman in leadership, there are certain things that I think that unfortunately, I think a lot of us, if not all of us, have been sexually harassed in some sort of way, where somebody has said something or done something, and you're like, yeah, nah, that a male on male, or those who identify as male, wouldn't have done certain things or said certain things. But I think that the tougher piece of trying to peel back that onion is like, are you saying something crazy to me because I'm a woman again, or do you think it's because I'm young, in your mind, young? Because there's a lot of people who tell me I'm old. I don't know where I'm falling on the age spectrum these days, and or are you doing it because I'm Black? And so it does become harder when it's, at least for me, not very specifically around sexual advances, to say, is it because I'm a woman again, or age, or race?
Absolutely, and thank you for that. But also just being completely transparent with some of the questions or some of the advances that people may make on you, whether because you're a woman or because you're a Black woman or because of whatever your age is. And so I appreciate you sharing that, and I appreciate you giving us some insight into what it's like to be a Black woman in leadership today in 2021.
Well, I say being Black is a whole nother issue though, because I definitely got some stuff that must be Black. But go ahead, Lory. I don't want to step on your toes.
No, I want to hear what were you gonna say? Go ahead.
Well, I think a couple of things. One, I don't know if anybody else is getting feedback. Is anybody else getting feedback? Is it me?
No.
It's me. Okay. Well, that happens. It is usually me. Well, I think that there are things that, and I know we're going to talk specifically about like Sidwell and, certain experience about, Sidwell and being Black at Sidwell. But again, I think that what's happening, particularly now around being Black, is that we have a lot of quote unquote allies, quote unquote progressives, people who are not going to clearly articulate that their issue is race, or race tied to socioeconomic, or some of these other things where you're just not going to have that. And I should have pulled the quote. I meant to pull it, but Dr. King said, many years ago, that he'd rather sit with the KKK than the so-called moderate. He put it much better. But the point is that, we got a lot of folks who, the day after Trump was elected, put on the little pink hats. We got a lot of folks who, put on their Facebook pages, support Black women. We got a lot of folks who donated to Stacey Abrams, and they feel like they're down, right? They announce themselves as allies and so on and so forth. But what's happening in that is a lot of folks just thinking that they are being supportive, and that because they've donated, because they did this thing on Facebook, because they marched or whatever, that now they have greater ownership over you. And that, no, they really are about, people of color and the biopic and this, that, and the other. But no, you somehow are the problem, but I support it more globally. And so I think that I have certainly been running into walls that are far more politically correct, progressively build walls that it is very clear when you say, would this have happened to a me in a different shade? It's not plausible, but then you can't say that because then you're infringing on that, right? And then it's like, well, I don't understand why this has become about race, or oh my goodness, I can't believe we're talking about this. I support. Look at my t-shirt. but no, you're doing things that are hard to explain otherwise. And you look at predecessors, you look at colleagues, you look at the way other people are allowed to talk, react, say things. You look at the way that one woman saying something is, well, she's direct, she gets right to the point. You somehow get a Black woman saying something far more mild-mannered and just say, I don't really understand where you're coming from. That was really aggressive. I thought that your tone was real harsh. But that was a question. So again, I think that, once we really, I think it's a very difficult place to be in, particularly now, particularly with racial equity being at the center of so many conversations, so many funding efforts. It's become so cool to write an op-ed about racial equity, but behind closed doors, how are you treating the people of color who are closest to you? And I'll say for myself, and certainly for others who are in similar positions, I constantly feel and hear that there are mega double standards going on.
Kim, thank you for sharing that. And wow, that was very authentic. And there are a number of things that you identified, and I want to name them just so we're clear. So we talked about allies. You mentioned the phrase BIPOC, and for those who are unfamiliar with that phrase, that's Black and Indigenous people of color. And then you mentioned something else that you described and the characteristics of it, but you didn't put a name on it. And I want to help you with that. And what I think you were describing was tone policing. And you're experiencing people who are allies or claiming to be allies who are trying to police your tone and how you respond to how you respond in general. And so I think that it's very important for us to name these things and put a name on it and identify what they are. So I definitely appreciate you sharing that and being authentic with your response.
So I have a question, just to follow all of that up. I'm curious, as you're not only a woman in leadership at Martha's Table, but by virtue of the position that Martha's Table holds, right? You really are an agent for people who are truly among our most vulnerable citizens. How, if you're, challenged, right, by not just, people broadly, right, but individual people who are not only in positions of leadership, but potential donors or potential partners, how do you navigate that space? What are the, if you can give us some examples of the choices that you're making in order to move forward in the way that you have. One of the reasons that I really wanted to talk to you tonight is because last year was a tumultuous year for all of us, right? Absolutely, just a year of chaos. But the rest of us, at least most of us, were not having to navigate being really in not only in the public's eye, right, but also being in that position of being able to service, being a direct service, right, direct service provider to vulnerable people, but also people who are who are most strongly affected by the pandemic, by the racial and social unrest. So I'm curious how you, right, as Kim, how you navigate that space such that you were able to provide for so many other people who are never going to necessarily see or interact with, the white moderate, let's say, but who need, I don't know, $700 or need, clothes or whatever that service might be?
Yeah, so I will do my best to be as concise as possible with this response, although I'm going to say a lot. So let's get ready. First of all, it's been about a year, almost to the day, that the first case of COVID was diagnosed in the District of Columbia, and everybody had to make decisions. And we knew nothing about COVID. I certainly didn't know anything about COVID, but in my gut, I believed that it was going to harm the communities we stand alongside more so than it would harm others. Unfortunately, I was right in that. We did two things immediately. One was we sent our nationally accredited early childhood education centers into a virtual model, but we didn't just say we're going virtual. What we did was we launched our first ever cash assistance program, where we gave each one of our families $9,000 free and clear per household, plus per child, $15 a day worth of grocery gift cards, plus diapers, wipes, and formula per child. So if dad got $9,000, and if dad has two kids, $30 a day in grocery gift cards, 2 sets of diapers, 2 sets of wipes, 2 sets of formula. Why did we do that? Because again, we knew it was going to be bad. We just knew it was going to be bad. Okay. And we started that, and we just did it. And, sometimes you just have to go with your gut. And we did that for month after month after month after month. In doing that, it showed, again, part of what you also mentioned, the two worlds that we're dealing with that couldn't be farther from each other, but that doesn't mean that either of the worlds are wrong. And this is a part of what we keep dealing with, and what I keep dealing with, which is it's no one is saying it's bad or wrong to be well off, to be privileged, to have resources that you can support. And nobody is asking you to somehow have some deep connection to another world, right? But there's an interesting dynamic internally that's going on with world one. Then we have world two, who is suffering through systemic injustices that have nothing to do with them, but for the system has been built to work against them. There is a reason that your zip code dictates your future economics, your future education, your housing, whether it's rent or you own, your affiliations with the justice system, your health outcomes. And what COVID has done is exacerbated all this. We've all read the white papers. We all kind of like knew this was true, but COVID landed and it exasperated everything. Ward 8 has never been number one in COVID positive rates, but has been number one in deaths the entire time. And every single zip code, and there's not a lot of them, but in Ward 8 have all of those, everything you want to be high is low and everything you want to be low is high. So we've got two worlds that are in distance incredibly close, but in their worlds couldn't be farther from one another. Plus, you have this thing that happened, and so many organizations, they closed. They restricted operations. We never closed. The first thing, as I mentioned, we sent our nationally accredited early childhood education centers to virtual, but we did the cash assistance. And then we pivoted all of our food operations to go into a pre-bag model, and we expanded. We launched 10 new community pop-up sites all throughout Ward 8 because we have transportation and safety issues. We supported those who were in seasoned citizen villages. We've supported all the DCPS meal sites. And the more and more we were doing these things, it just became clear, if not us, who? And if not now, when? Our entire mission is to stand alongside the communities to support strong children, strong families, and strong communities. And if not us, who? Right? And if not, then when? Like, this is the time that you have to step up. You have to be bold. You have to have courage. I was terrified every day. Every day. You want to talk about being real? Terrified. I'm Black. I'm overweight. And I have asthma that I've been hospitalized for my life. But every day, because why? who else was going to give not food, but hope? And that's what we've been trying to do, is to through dignity and respect, through everything that we do, to know that your situation and your life was already not great. And then this thing that you have no control over has wrecked you in multiple ways. Again, some communities, it sucks that your favorite restaurant is closed and you can't go to it. It's annoying that you're stuck in your house. But what happens when it's like 5 people and 600 square feet, 2 bedrooms? You're stuck with your abuser. The kids can't go out and play. It's not safe. So it's like, you just started to see not just the health, you started to see physical health, you start to see mental and emotional health. You're starting to see all of these just jumps in violence, domestic violence, other violence, substance abuse. And you see mass just losses in employment. People lost their jobs, they lost their side hustles. You start to see so much more hopelessness. And then throughout all of this was the year that, everybody decided to it's not like it was new that killing Black people was like, okay, but this is happening too. So you walk through the neighborhood and you just see people who are terrified of being somebody breathing on them. They've lost their jobs. They're trying to do anything and everything they can for their families. And then it just becomes okay. And it wasn't just George Floyd and, Aubrey and all of these others. It was in DC too. These things were happening. And it's still very much on people's minds. And so again, I just think that you have to sometimes put yourself out there. You have to have the courage. And again, I was personally, I had a lot of threats. What if this goes wrong? What if Martha's Table becomes a epicenter of COVID and all these other organizations close? You shouldn't have done this. And but again, sometimes you just got to go with your gut. And that's what I did. And that's what we did. And we had, we have over 125 team members. Martha's Table team is amazing. But so many people, for very valid, incredible reasons, weren't able to support. The first 4 months, we had 16 people who came in. 16 people carried this operation for 4 months. And everybody just understood what I said before. If not us, who? And if not now, when?
Wow, you can't get any better than that when it comes to someone putting their life on the line. So once again, I have to thank you, because you did not have to disclose, what you're dealing with health-wise. And so we talked about this being an authentic and transparent conversation, and that's exactly what it is so far. And so you named a number of things, or you described a number of things that you didn't put a label on, but I want to continue to put labels on them and call them what they are, or what I think they are, which are twin pandemic. We're dealing with cops and Corona. And I think that it was Trevor who put it in the chat, COVID-19 as the great magnifier of existing disparities and inequities. So we can look at education, we can look at healthcare, we can look at corporate America. All of these things have been magnified due to the coronavirus pandemic. And so I also heard that you said you are the leader and the person who's at the forefront of Martha's Table as a hope dealer, as someone who is out dealing hope to the people and the masses in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. You stated that you never closed or you never shut down. All of these businesses, from Nike to Starbucks to Apple to schools, they all closed. But Martha's Table stayed open. Essential workers on the front line. The only other people that I remember staying open were hospitals and maybe grocery stores. But I think even they shut down for at least a week or two. But it was I'm just happy to hear that Martha's Table stayed open and delivered the hope to the citizens of Washington, D.C., which brings me to my next question, or just something that I was wondering or reflecting on. you said that you were terrified throughout this entire year, because we're coming up on a year to on March 13th, where what I feel the entire metropolitan area, DMV, just shut down. And you had to deal with this. But I'm wondering, how did you maintain your sanity? How did you stay sane through it all? What did you do to keep your mental health intact? And of course, you don't have to answer. You can pass it, because that's something that's very personal, and that is something that's very intimate. But that's something that I was wondering. How did you stay sane? Who did you talk to? Who did you confide in when all this was going on?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been very honest throughout my career that I would never claim to have good work-life balance, and I have spent a good chunk, the majority of my career in service and very focused on mission. And everywhere that I go, I ask everybody else to be focused on mission. When I was at the community college, I asked everybody to learn the mission, and I would just like quiz you walking by. What's our mission? Okay. And so when you ask, what kept me going, it's the mission. I mean, and I know it's you say, what is Martha's Table's mission? To support strong children, strong families, strong communities, to make sure that every Washingtonian has the opportunity to stay and thrive. COVID, all the communities that we stand alongside are not best positioned to be able to stay and thrive on a good day. Gentrification is running against those communities. There's just a lot that's running against those communities. And what COVID did was accelerate everything. So for me, I just laser focused in on mission. And for not just the 16 people who came in those first several months, and others since then, but those who were teleworking and otherwise, it's just, you had to focus in. You just had to focus in and just see that this is why we're here. And we may never have thought that a Martha's Table was expected to go out every day. McKinnon's Wagon went out 7 days a week, no matter anything, to provide a hot meal to those facing housing instability. We had to go through tanks. DEA would search our free food truck every day. We had many armed situations with Capitol Police and MPD and the National Guard and everything. But you just have to think, well, what about those 200 folks who that's the only hot meal they get? Our groceries went from 500 bags of groceries a day to over 2,000 bags of groceries a day within 2 months of the beginning of the pandemic. And that's almost a 1-to-1 per person. If somebody comes and asks for 2 bags, we'll certainly give it to you. But can you imagine in March of last year, 500 bags of groceries a day? By May, June, 2,000 a day. And again, like where else are you gonna get food? You just lost your job and you lost your size. So you're not driving for Lyft anymore. You're not a hostess at the restaurant, host or hostess at the restaurant anymore. So again, focusing in. I don't claim to think that I have the best mental health. I'm sure if anybody on here is a mental health professional, I'd probably rate like somewhere near crazy. And some of y'all have known me for a long time, so that wouldn't shock any of y'all. I see Ralph laughing. But I think sometimes you have to just tunnel vision in and just, again, go with your gut, and just, if you believe it's the right thing to do, and if you believe that that you have the ability. I talk a lot about power and why I think people exert power incorrectly and like way too often. If I can ask you to move the table, you might move the table just because you have the ability to direct somebody to move a table. But why do that, right? There's very few times that I think in your life, professionally or personally, that you really should exert power. And this was one of those moments where it was like, the power for us was to say that we won't close, we will expand, and we're going to do anything and everything we can to keep this going. I mean, because that's the other thing. Nobody knew what was going to happen with donations. I didn't budget for a global pandemic. I didn't budget for, you know, a 400% increase in food, which by the way, the cost of food went up, right? I didn't plan for supply chain distributions or any of this stuff. And people kept asking, well, how are you guys making it? We just keep going. Sometimes you just gotta keep going. And I think with something that's as bizarre as COVID, and as harmful as COVID, and as Treva said, shout out to Dr. Lindsay again, is like, it just exacerbated every single inequity, every single systemic problem that exists. It just, there's no way that you can look at COVID and not point at anything, whether you want to say education, again, housing, affiliations with justice system, health outcomes. There's nothing you can point at and not be able to see through COVID that there are systems that have been structurally working against certain people for a very, very long time.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Kim. Really appreciate that.
Come on, y'all, hit us in the chats.
So I'm gonna unmute myself because before we move on to the audience questions, although I think I think we already have some actually. But before we move on to that, I did want to ask something that I've been thinking about as you were talking. So I think that my approach is like polar opposite, right? I'm overweight. My family has been hit by COVID and we've lost a number of people. I have all of these like respiratory issues. I am the person who should not be on the front line. Like that's been my outlook, But what I really want to think about is, how do we, right, your community, how can we, as, people who might not be able to be out, serving, I don't know, individuals or even running, in leadership at an organization like Martha's Table, how do we better engage with the community? And I think that there was something that you said about, the sort of two worlds, right? One of the things that Nasser and I were discussing before, as we were planning this evening, was that from my perspective, our community, right, the Sidwell community, oftentimes has an unusual relationship to the greater Washington area. And I really want to get to the bottom of that. I really want to find ways for us to better connect and to see ourselves, this smaller community, really as part of, not just alongside, but inside of, right, part of this greater community. So what I'm wondering is have you identified ways that, how would you like for us to be showing up, both to support you as our, friend, our colleague, our, someone within our community, as well as how do you envision us individually and as a group better supporting those vulnerable people with whom you work and who your organization is really aimed at supporting?
Well, first, I'm sorry to hear that you've lost folks, and to anybody and everybody who's lost folks to COVID and otherwise. This has just been it's been a tough season, and I think that we have to acknowledge that we're all dealing with a lot of things that are tough mentally, emotionally, and physically. And I think that, part of your question is, what can we do for each other? And I like that as a friend and a colleague, is to reach out and to say things, to understand what people are going through. And while we might not be certified or licensed to provide mental health supports or other types of supports, to just let people know that, we're there. I think that there's just been so much devastation. For me, it's really put in perspective that you can talk to somebody one day and they're gone the next. And I learned that a long time ago. But I think a lot of people are learning that now. And we should just be really, really active. I love that somebody posted on Facebook, and I've reposted this a couple of times: normalize telling your friends you love them. Say it often, make it weird. And I think that we should do that, because I think we all know tomorrow's never promised, but this has really underscored it. And I think that, again, as a friend and a colleague, we should all do that. And I always ask people to do things when I give these talks. And so one thing, and I'll come back to it later, but I want you guys to think about, somebody that you haven't maybe spoken to in a while, not that you're on bad terms or anything, but just like you haven't spoken to somebody for a while, and somebody that you admire. And I just want you to just kind of think about, like, who would those folks be? Engaging with the community, if physically you can't come out, there's a lot of ways to support Martha's Table and other organizations. Obviously financial. I'm not making a pitch for any money, but it does go a long way, not just for us, but for everybody. We have a clothing boutique that has been closed for a year now, but we get clothes out into the community, and we go through we've been going through hundreds of coats every week. This week, maybe coats are not necessary. It's 70 degrees. And many of you who follow me know we just launched an online where you can, order clothes, but also phone in English and Spanish for people to call in for those supports. Making sandwiches, we go through 10,000 sandwiches a week. And you can have your own sandwich making party by yourself, you and maybe some other people who are in your head. I mean, all y'all can make sandwiches. But on McKenna's, there's a hot meal, and then sandwiches, trail mix, and water. And so, there's just, and I think whether it's Martha's Table or anywhere else that you support, I think that you should just, see what kind of supports that you can provide. And sometimes, and I say this to some folks, sometimes it's just really reaching out and saying thank you. I mean, as at the organization, I do that. I do one-on-ones with everybody. I reach out to people all the time, just seeing how you're doing. People say it must take so much time. It's the best time I ever spend. I mean, I don't know, hands, anybody been to a meeting today that was a complete waste of time? Could have been an email, didn't need to happen. I see hands, yes. Imagine if you invested that time in reaching out to team members and colleagues and just checking in. It's just a better investment of time. And I think that that's critically important. And then I love I'm going to use this, Lory. Sidwell has an unusual relationship. That is far more diplomatic than I can say. I have a number of folks on the board who are affiliated with Sidwell, whether they're alums or parents or parents of folks. Sidwell is a very, in my experience, now granted, I graduated over 20 years ago, has when I was there, has had an unusual relationship. We've had an unusual relationship that I don't know that we have evolved out of yet, where there are thoughts by some, and it's not just Sidwell, it's GDS, it's Choate, it's Andover, it's Exeter, it's, a lot of places. But I don't know that we've evolved out of the definition of charity versus social justice, social impact, and really trying to change trajectories. Because at the end of the day, it's really easy to have something tangible to say, I gave X and Y happened. I did this and this happened. But as we at Martha's Table give out, over 10,000 bags of groceries a week, I constantly advocate for people having the ability to buy their own groceries, because as dignified as the experience is with us, and everything that we do to make sure that regardless that money is not exchanging hands, that you're treated the same way. In COVID, it's different because everything's pre-packed. But normally when you come to our markets, you get a basket and you shop and you choose, and a retail associate bags you up. When you come to our boutique, we give you a credit card and we load credits on your credit card, and it's a boutique and you shop. And again, you can stay there all day. It's not a clothing closet. It's not a timed experience. You go, they swipe you out on your credit card. They tell you how much you spent. You get bagged up, you go. And those are economic stabilizers. That's removing some costs that you might have to have. But like, why? And the reason we do the things the way we do them is because our colleagues, us, right? We shouldn't have somehow a different experience than others. At least that's our belief. If you're going to a market, you should have a market experience. It doesn't matter that you're paying. If you're going to shop for clothes, it doesn't matter that you're not paying. You should have the same experience. But what if there were economic mobility and trajectory there such that people were able to buy what they wanted, to be able to say that, you know, we had couscous this week and they want quinoa. Well, they can go to the Whole Foods and go get it. Of course, granted, we would need a Whole Foods or a grocery store, really, in 7 and 8. But when you start talking about that, it's not as tangible. I understand if I give you $8, you can give somebody a bag of groceries. I don't understand how if I give you $8, how that could change into economic trajectory such that people can actually go buy what they want. And then the bigger tug, which is the really controversial piece that, again, those who are rocking that I support Stacey Abrams shirt aren't going to say, is maybe you really actually don't want that. Maybe you don't want for people to be able to buy a house next to you and send their kids to Sidwell. And maybe even if you wanted the kids to go to Sidwell, you want to be able to pay for them to go to Sidwell so you can say, I did that, you know, versus I made a choice like my mother did and many of all of the parents on the phone did, you know. And it's a very tough conversation. That doesn't mean that that's everybody. It certainly is not. That doesn't mean it's the majority. I'm certainly not saying that either. But it is a more difficult conversation, is a more difficult grasping for folks who have grown up and been around these progressive mindsets where we have been taught and conditioned to want to help and to want to support and to want to stand alongside. But then when it really becomes about power shifting dynamics, then it's a problem. And then when it's a problem, we're not going to name it. Nasser, I love that you want to name things. That's not how we name that. We start creating all kinds of other things that we want to call not wanting to address core issues, root causes, systemic inequities. Again, we said this earlier. It's so wonderful that everybody is invested in racial equity up to after the conference on it. You want to do something real. So it is an unusual relationship, Lory. I love that. That's going to be my new phrase. And when y'all hear that, you know, I no longer have a job at Martha's Table, I'm gonna say, well, I had an unusual relationship with the BAA Summit.
Can I grab a couple questions out of the chat, Kim, and throw them toward you?
Absolutely.
Well, Marcus Shaw just asked in the chat something that I think speaks to a lot of what you were just saying, which is, do you believe that any of Martha's Table's target communities are permanently impaired in ways that we may not anticipate? And what do you see that the broader community is missing?
Hey, Marcus, it's good to see you as always. Our communities are permanently resilient and amazing. They are some of the strongest, smartest, most talented people ever. And so there are no permanent impairments. There are systemic issues. And the thing is, when we think about how you address systemic issues, and when you think about equity, equity is not equality, right? I'm sure everybody on this call knows this, but this also gets at some of the unusual relationships, is like, but we're doing this and that's happening here. It's not about equality, okay? It's about equity, which means if we're doing this here in certain zip codes, then we need to be doing this here, right? And I think if folks know the visual around equity, the three folks who are trying to watch the baseball game, one's already tall enough to see over the fence. You need nothing. One is kind of in the middle. You need a little stool. And one's a little dude and he needs a big stool. So what we need to be doing is investing in equitable outcomes, meaning that we have young people 6 weeks to age 4, but we also have to invest in their parents. And to simply say, well, you have nationally accredited early childhood education centers, all will resolve, is ridiculous. 1 in 3 residents in the District of Columbia is functionally illiterate. So, yes, the same nationally accredited early childhood education center in somewhere else in DC might be perfectly fine because the other supports are already built in to the households to, again, that zip code and everything that comes around that, to the home ownership, to the overall environment, both from a physical safety, but a health safety. So we need to then invest more and equitably in those communities. So everything can be undone if we wanted to do it. And it would actually cost less money than the systems that we have in place. The systems we have in place reinforce what's happening, and they're expensive. But if we actually really wanted to double down and to invest again equitably, we would see a lot of change. But that goes back to the tension, because again, part of the reason that the system is built inequitably and is built to work against certain people is because if you then distribute your power, you lose power. Others gain power and your standing starts to shift. And that is incredibly problematic in our society writ large, not Sidwell society, just writ large. Humble opinions from Kim R. Ford.
Thank you, Kim. Definitely thank you. Anna, do we have any other questions in the chat?
We do have one question in the chat, which is, what type of support have you received from the DC community, and did it increase as you expected?
Our support from the DC community has been very strong, and DC really stepped up. Now, a couple of things happened. One, a lot of people were looking to support organizations that were open. We were one of very few. That support ended up being financial support, but also volunteer support. And a lot of folks also who were losing their jobs and were looking for or were volunteering at other places ended up shifting to us. We hope that our wonderful charm and charisma has made them stay. But where the most interesting and the most really heartfelt for me support has come from are from our neighbors, are from our community members who've come and say, you know, first we've had a lot of folks who come and say, like, I never thought it would come to this. And we always say, we don't think of ourselves as some last stop and some handout. This goes back to the dignity and respect. We see ourselves as being an access point for healthy food, fruits, vegetables, and healthy shelf life items. And we talk to folks and we let them know, no, this is great. You should be proud to come and get your cabbage and your kale and your, couscous and everything. But through doing all of that, what we have seen is this incredible influx of volunteers from the neighborhood. And folks are like, they've come, in droves, and they're like, I don't have any money to give, but I want to give you my time. Do you know how much value that has? We have so many people, like our clothing donations have gone through the roof, but across the city. Goodwill closed for a long time, same thing with Salvation Army. But the community came and said, I want to give you a couple of coats. I outgrew them, or maybe I shrunk. We didn't have some COVID weight fluctuations, and to have folks in the community, give their time, give their resources. That's what it means to stand alongside. We don't do for you. We're with you. We're in this together. And I usually don't like that because it's like so cliche now, but it's true for us. When we say we're standing alongside, that's what it really means. And to see that happen, to see more and more folks, again, who are in the communities that we stand alongside, giving back to us in the ways that they can, that's just truly humbling. And that's going to sustain. I'll say this. When Martha's Table, when we moved off 14th Street and went to Southeast, it was an uproar. And there's a lot of distrust, rightful distrust in Ward 8, particularly for organizations like what someone could say a Martha's Table is, a white organization that comes in with that savior mentality and is going to come in and save all the Black and brown people. And we built this wonderful building, 57,000 square feet of the most beautiful space you've ever seen. It's all glass. I can't tell you how many times people are like, I didn't want y'all here. I voted against you. I went to every meeting. And then now what they come, remember I told you, I didn't want you here, but thank God y'all are here. Because we are truly, we're proven that we are not that charity that hands things out and that we're doing something for you or to you. We have shown that we are going to stand alongside you in the toughest of times, and we're going to go through this slog with you, and we're going to treat you with dignity and respect, and we're going to extend the grace that you deserve every day, but certainly in the hardest of days. I see more chats coming in.
Absolutely. We have two.
I got hype on this stuff, man.
We got two more questions. We got one from Elena Young, class of 2007. How do you suggest we try and change this quote unquote charity narrative among schools that are PWIs?
Yeah, I think I won't go on I have an entire speech on language. I think we really have got to just rethink everything about language, because language dictates behavior. And the more that people want to just do things to people and like throw a couple dollars or something and feel good about themselves, I think just really has to be rethought. And it's just tricky because it goes back to those two worlds. Like, we've grown from a $14 million a year organization to $17 million a year organization. And I'm the primary fundraiser. I got to go get $17 million a year from some folks who want charity. And it's really hard to try to say, I don't really like what you're saying. I don't really like a lot of the words that are coming out of your mouth. And it's a tough balance. And I think it's going to take time, but I think that it's going to take courage. And I think it's going to take just repeated reminders that I think listening is very important. And when people tell you what it is they are saying, even if they don't really believe it, I think you spit it back out to them. You are saying that you want to invest in racial equity. This is what racial equity means, right? That's not a charitable function. Racial equity is not charity. Like, by definition, that's actually off. You can't you'd be charitable to racial equity. It's actually off, right? But it's tough. It's a tough slog, and it's going to take time. It really is, because there are a number of people, and the motivation with which it's intended is correct. The spirit is correct. They want to help. They want to give back. They have just learned and been conditioned for so long that the way you do that is through certain ways. And most people want to see things that are tangible. It's very hard to sell a multi-generational approach to undo multi-generational problems. It is very easy to sell. This person, unfortunately, is unhoused tonight and needs a hot meal. And so how do we as a community, and kind of going back to Lory's question, how can we come together and try and change that narrative? Not just change it, but prove the impact, the lasting impact, and the generational impact that it will have if we can do both. Because I don't subscribe to it's an either or. I think for that person who's unhoused tonight, we should provide a hot meal and those sandwiches that you're going to make, and the trail mix and the water. But I also think that we should be working on the systems so that that person can get housed and stabilized and supported so that they can get to a place where they can achieve their dream.
Absolutely.
We did have one more question in the chat, Kim, about, from your perspective, how equitably the vaccine is being distributed here in DC. And do you think that we're doing a good job of making sure those most in need have access to that?
No, we're not. And we're fighting against. So the theme of today is systemic issues. One of the systemic issues is that for a long time, people have been conditioned to believe that certain things, like a vaccine, may not be helpful in certain communities. So we're having a couple of issues. Is it equitably distributed? No. But is it also because we have pushback from certain communities who would probably benefit? Yes. And do we have like the narrative that's kind of going all around both of these? Yes. Right. So So it's really tricky. I mean, at Martha's Table, we offered it to everyone, and only 40% of our team took us up on it. And our team was very much resemblant of the community, Black and Brown communities. And when you look and when we hear from other organizations and other entities, it's tracking about the same. So we've been on a relentless education mission. We've brought in doctors. I mentioned earlier to thank to Dr. Castle, who I know is speaking at a later panel. We brought in Dr. Fitzpatrick. We keep bringing in professionals to talk to folks to help them understand like what's real, what's not real, what's myth, what's science. But I got to tell you, you go down to the Alabama Ave Giant, you will never in life have seen less people from Southeast. Okay. To me, it's phenomenal. You're like, huh. Okay, so no, it's not being done equitably, but the demand has to be there, and we have to stop the false narrative. And I'll just say, like, it's killing me every time I see people post or say something about side effects or this, that, and the other. And I'm like, guys, we need to be on a real, a scientific and a true campaign, but we also shouldn't reinforce all the negativity. I just watched so many people say like, well, so-and-so had this, and that. Well, what was your side effect? Oh, I didn't have any. Why didn't you post that? Why didn't you post that you had no issues? Why didn't you post like, I'm feeling great? Why didn't you post that you have a friend, a colleague, a family member, somebody who's been getting the living daylights beaten out of them for the past several months with COVID? Well, we haven't been posting that. That doesn't seem to be the message. It's a reinforcement of, I'm scared of it. It's not going to work. I'm going to wait. And if I get it, like, these awful things are going to happen to me. And I just really wish we would do a better job at least being more balanced. About the approach, particularly in the communities. And for us, we do everything at a minimum in English and Spanish. We do as much as we can in Amharic as well. But I think it's also critically important to be able to speak with and be able to listen to people in their native languages, because we're also having, I think, a lot of language mishaps and lost in translation messages that we've at least experienced.
Thank you. I know Natalie Randolph, our wonderful director of EJC and fellow alumna, had a quick question, if you don't mind giving us just a couple extra minutes of your time, Kim.
Of course.
Hey, Kim. Thank you so much first. I mean, I'm in awe of you. But I wanted to ask, I love what you said about, the charity thing and our was it unusual that you used?
Unusual, no, it was Lory, our unusual relationship.
Yes. And that is, I love that you said that, because that's the very thing that I'm trying to change right now, and that we are trying to change. And if you had, we are teaching, these new classes, if there was one thing that you would teach kids that, how we were growing up at Sidwell, that are in a class learning about all of these things, what would be one thing that you would want to harp on to kind of get past that? No, it's not just about going and serving soup. It's not just about, going and give your money here. I know that's hard, but what's one thing that we need to focus on to drum into the psyche here, if we're trying to disrupt that?
So I'll give just a couple real quick. I know you asked for one. I think one, the power of what you have control over matters. And that's why I do give entire speeches on language. You can control what comes out of your mouth and what you say and how you say it and who you say it to. And I think that, even just changing all of that, because again, language dictates behavior. So if we stop saying charity, we say nonprofit, or we say social justice movements, or we say standing alongside communities, it's very different. You have not heard me say serve. We don't serve anyone. We support, and we stand alongside. It might sound like just PC stuff, but it's very different. It's very different. Our entire strategic plan was led by the community. not we came up with it and then tried to get buy-in. So again, I think that one of the things that is easiest is to control the things that you can control, and you can control language, and language has extraordinary power. I think the other thing that I would say is linking that then to dignity and respect, because the most dignified thing that you can do to support someone is to give them their own money so that they can make the choices for themselves. And we have, as I mentioned, our cash assistance program, it also was the foundation for now a larger program, which is actually now the largest in the country. It's called Thrive East of the River. We're very proud that we were the ones that built that. And now that's with 3 other organizations. But teach people about, or young people and their parents, teach them about true change and what it means to be treated the same way. This will be the equality, but the same way that you're treated. I would never, ever, if you said you needed something, I would give you the money. And I would never think that you would use it for alcohol or betting on ponies or anything, because I treat you with dignity and respect. So I think that that's what we need to really build into curriculum, take that hard look at language, take a hard look at it, because there's a lot of words mean a lot of things, and a lot of them aren't positive. And then root everything in dignity and respect, and just constantly beat back into folks. How would you want to be treated? How would you want to be treated? How would you want to be treated? Why is it okay for you and not them? Why is it okay for your family, but not theirs? Why is it that you get to go, all across the world, or go into any restaurant you want and eat whatever you want? Why is that afforded to you, but you just want to make sure that other people might just have enough that night, So I would say that, and I know we are getting tight on time. It's late. I'm like usually in bed by now, but I did say that I asked you guys to think about somebody that you haven't spoken to, and somebody that you admire. And I just asked, I know some folks have already started to drop. I just asked that you just reach out to both of those folks who you've thought about. Somebody you haven't spoken to, and again, it could be all on bad terms. It could just be that it's been a wild year, but just reach out, say hi, say I'm thinking about you, and reach out to somebody that you admire and just say thank you. I think particularly in the Black community, we don't hear thank yous, and I'm just checking on you. And I don't want anything other than you to know that I care. And I just think we should do that and be really proactive. And I'm not just saying this as like a cute thing to say. I'm serious. Pick up your phone, call somebody, text somebody, email somebody, slide in their DMs, whatever. But please, let's do that, and let's normalize it, and let's make it weird.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Kim Ford, our most wonderful Kim R. Ford, our most wonderful keynote speaker here tonight, and to Lory Alexander and Nasser Muhammad, our fantastic co-clerks who have helped lead this conversation. We have much more coming throughout the rest of this weekend, I guess you can say, tomorrow and Saturday. So visit sidwell.edu/BAA to see the full schedule if you can't remember, or if you can't find it in your email. If you have any questions, you can email me. You can send a note to alumni@sidwell.edu, and we will get you all set with all the information you need. We just really appreciate all of you being here tonight. And thank you again to Kim and to Lory and Nasser. And we wish you a wonderful night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and support Martha's Table.
Love it.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you, friends. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Lory. Thank you, Nasser, Anna, Emma. Y'all are the bomb.